Great. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Bellevue School District. We're calling our meeting to order. Today is Thursday, October 20th, 2022. At this time, we'll do roll call.
Jane Aris. Christine Chu, and can we undo my video thing so that they can see me online, please? Thank you.
Seema Sarafan,
Art Jarvis, Superintendent.
sorry, I think there was a little mishap there. I think we have another
fault.
director. Yeah.
Joyce Shuey, I don't know if you heard me or not, so am I
We got
repeating?
you. Yeah,
Okay.
we got you. I think our Vice President Watson is not yet joined. So we'll move on. And Superintendent?
Superintendent Art Jarvis.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Okay, we had a little bit of
about the
order
being
problem, but
premature.
we're all good. All right, so at this time, I'd love to have our student introduced, Executive Director Harrison.
Thank you, President Serafan. So tonight we have Alice Lamb. Alice is here. She's a 7th grader from Chinook Middle School, and she's accompanied tonight by her mother, Luciana, who's got her phone out, and her principal, Mr. James Peterson. So head up
Wonderful.
here, Alice, and we're ready to roll.
Hi there. And I understand you're going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and you're also going to read for us the land acknowledgement. So I think with that, we will follow you. We will, in just a second, Alice, they'll project the flag and we'll follow you in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay. I pledge allegiance. Oh, sorry. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish, where people reserve treaty rights to this land, specifically the Duwamish and Snoqualmie tribes. We thank the caretakers of this land who lived and continue to live here since the time immemorial. We reflect on this historic context that brings us to reside on this land and accept responsibility to interrupt erasure. We commit to an ongoing partnership with the Snoqualmie tribe and listen to and learn from and lead with their guidance.
Thank you. So Alice, this is your time to tell us a little bit about yourself. So take it away, and we'd love to hear more about you.
I'm from Brazil and I came to the United States about a year ago in September. When I joined First Genic, I didn't learn much of English. I couldn't speak very much, but then in school they appreciated me and I did a lot of friends very easily, even though I couldn't communicate very well, and they accepted me very well, and I'm very happy for that. One thing that I would like to talk about, it's about advisory, because there's where I made most of my friends and where I think I learned the most English. I think I learned the most English there because it's one place that I don't really need to learn. I can talk mostly, and when you talk to people, you normally learn more English. So I started talking to a lot of people there and made a lot of friends, what made me very happy and also made me easier to learn in English in school. And I also like the advisory because I'm of my friends that were very supportive and helped me a lot in school when I needed help with like some problems, homework, and activities. And I'm very happy for that. Other thing that I would like to say is I really appreciate my teachers because they helped me a lot when I was in school. Like there was one that spoke Portuguese and she really helped me in science when I needed help. And another one that was real nice to me and showed me some people around school that told me how the school was and helped me become friends with other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alice. So before we go to item 1.6 on our agenda, I just wanted to acknowledge that Vice President Watson has joined our meeting. So we have all 5 board directors here. So Just for acknowledgements, you may wish to look at them too on item 1.6, but let me quickly read what they are. This is Indigenous Peoples Month. It is also Learning Disabilities Awareness Month, Dyslexia Awareness Month, National Principles Month, Czech Heritage Month, Italian American Heritage and Culture Month, Polish American Heritage Month. And then there are specific days. Today is the Great Shakeout Earthquake Drill. Monday, October 24th is Deepavali and Diwali. Tuesday, October 25th is Birth of the Bob. October 26th is the birth of Baha'u'llah. We acknowledge and celebrate and honor all of those. We now move to item 1.7, and I ask for a second to my motion to approve tonight's agenda. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, Director Shui, I think I have an aye since you gave me a second, so the agenda is approved. We now go to item 2, our consent agenda. And I ask for a second to my motion to approve approve this consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
I do.
Director Aris?
As looking at the documents presented in the consent agenda and going through the approval of advanced learning plan, I had a couple of questions that I apologize. I was not able to make the Monday meeting, so I don't know if these questions have been already brought up. But I noticed that it's very thorough, but there's one question I had was, when there are students who are falling into twice exceptional possibility, are they given other options or other testing accepted, like WISC-4 and so on?
So what I think is appropriate is for us to take item 2.4 out of the consent agenda, go ahead and pass the rest of the consent agenda. Perhaps what we can do is, because this is a plan, I believe this is an operational plan, we're required to pass that's based on basically funding. But what I might suggest is let's first do the rest of the consent agenda, and then perhaps somebody from the superintendent's team can briefly address a question you have so that we can return and consider passing that. So at this time, taking out item 2.4 as to the rest of the consent agenda, I see Director Shui's hand is up.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was 2.5.
I thought it was the advanced learning
It's a
plan.
2.4.
Yeah, I said 2.4. Did I say 2.5?
Yeah.
No,
I'm
you
sorry.
said 2.4, but am I looking at something different?
Directors, item 2.4 is approval of surplus items. Item 2.5 is approval of the advanced learning plan.
Okay, I am unclear. So I will go with what is correct, but I'm just looking at what's there on my side, but perhaps it's.
Yeah,
showing a
same on the online that I have. I think that there's one thing that's being projected right now, and then there's the actual meeting agenda, and the two are out
Okay.
of sync.
They're not the same. All right, so yeah, what's been projected is not what we're looking at online, so thank you for clarifying that. Either way, it is the item that relates to the advanced learning plan. Online, it shows that item 2.4. I
And
understand what's,
the projection now too. Thank you.
okay, so with that,
Sorry, I couldn't hear what Joyce just said.
Director
just
Shui,
Yeah, it's fixed in the projection now. Thank you. Whoever fixed it.
thank you. Okay, so consent agenda minus item 2.4. All those in favor, please say
Actually, I
aye.
still have a comment on that.
Okay, all right.
I just wanted to call out that we have come to another collective agreement with with our transportation group, our drivers and our workers in that space and our professionals, and really appreciate how collaborative our community is and how willing to work through these agreements. It's never easy. And I wanted to thank our staff and our employee groups for the work that they've done to get us there, because it's no small feat. And I think we always take a moment and acknowledge when we get an agreement with our largest groups, but sometimes we forget that these other groups are equally meaningful and have the same dedication involved in them from our staff and from our employees. So I just wanted to be thankful and notice that.
Perfectly said. Thank you. So with that, thank you. All those in favor of passing the consent agenda without item 2.4, please say aye.
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 All right, so I will ask Superintendent Jarvis as to 2.4. May I ask you if you can perhaps just high level address kind of contextually what Director Aris has asked about, or is there anybody here who could? Because I understand for planning purposes, this is needed to pass tonight.
I'm going
That's
to
right.
invite
Heather
both
Edlund is
Eva
online.
Collins and Dr. Kelly Uramaki.
Thank you.
Everybody. Heather Edlund is online and she's going to explain kind of the history of this. It's a pretty standard OSPI form, but she'll explain it.
Before Heather explains it, can I just have clarity from Director Aris what the question that's being posed is? I just want to make sure I understand that as well. I guess I would like it wasn't clear to me what the process is for families who may have children who may be twice exceptional in the plan. So I would like a little more explanation in what the process is for, parents who are trying to identify their children if they fall into advanced learning space in addition to other services. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi,
So-
everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. And
Okay, sorry.
Heather, it could be helpful just to step back and give us 30 seconds on how this fits into the OSPI requirements. That might be helpful.
Absolutely happy to. And sorry, my camera's on. I'm actually in a car right this minute. But so essentially, each year we're required for our funding to supply a plan. That is the template of the plan to OSPI with respect to both how we're identifying students for special or for advanced learning services, as well as providing services to them. And so the questions that are responded to there are part of that compliance component. The question with respect to students who may be twice exceptional. So when we do have students who are looking for advanced learning services who may also be eligible for accommodations or special education services, we do work individually with those families based on those specific needs to provide any accommodations that are allowable by the specific test or measure. So, for example, you'll see there's quite a number of measures that are listed in the plan, things like the STAR assessment. They can have readers, extended time, all kinds of things like that. Some of the more standardized measures have fewer accommodations that can be offered. So depending on each student and their needs, that eligibility process is then determined for that student, which accommodations we can provide and for which portions.
Director Aris, does that address?
Yeah, is there a place where it's clearly written out for our community to access that information?
So the information on eligibility is on the district website. I can't look at that right now, so I don't want to speak out of turn and tell you that it's there, and if it's not, but I do know that on a regular basis we are contacted by families, as well as when we get nominations for students, we look and see if any of them have an identification either for Section 504 or an IEP, and then we contact those families proactively. So they don't need to call that out for us. When the parents send in information saying they'd like testing, then we go ahead and look at their student profile in our student information system and contact them if they're eligible for accommodations or modifications to a specific component.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to renew my motion. I will renew the motion for 2.4 and ask for a second for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor of approving 2.4, sorry. All those in favor of approving what is listed as 2.4, which is the approval of the advanced learning plan for the purpose of funding from OSPI, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, hearing no objection, item 2.4 passes. We now move to the superintendent update. And Dr. Jarvis, I invite you to give us your update. Thank you.
Thank you, President Sarafan. I'd like to give multiple items this evening, but do it quickly. But the first one is today I actually received a set of data that I would like to share both with the board and the public. I think it's not only interesting, but it has a great deal of information towards looking ahead. One of the issues is for the first time in a long time, we have seen the free and reduced percentage, which has risen in the Bellevue School District rather than the fall of that number for many years. It was noted that over the past 20 years, only the 13-14 school year had an equivalent free and reduced rate. So we're seeing a slight change and perhaps in the anomaly, we get a glimpse of the future. Also, we saw a percentage of Asian students slightly decline this year and our demographics changing. So it's the first decrease in the percentage of our Asian population changing in the past 20 years. And correspondingly, a percentage of Black and Hispanic students increased slightly. So I just note that as a subtle, not major, but something that's clearly indicating that may be changing compared to the last couple decades. In particular,
Point
I
of
wanted to.
clarification, just
I'm
a
sorry.
point of clarification, if I may. You said that the students receiving free and reduced lunch increased, the Asian population dropped, and the Black and Hispanic population dropped. Is that correct?
The
And-
percentage of Black and Hispanic increased.
Oh, sorry, increase, yeah. And and you said it may be indicative of a trend, and they wanted to know, is that based on a grade level analysis, or is that just based on overall percentage analysis?
Just based on the total numbers that we've reported, for example, the free.
Thank you so much.
One of the comments that in particular I wanted to share with the board was, I think, descriptive of the Bellevue School District and where it's been for some time. But in 7 schools, more than half of the students now speak a language or multiple languages other than English. For Ardmore, 53%, Highland, 59%, Jingmei, 55%, Medina, 53%, Sherwood Forest, 54%, Somerset, 54%, Stevenson, 68%. At the high school level, a great variety of languages spoken. Interlake has 51 languages currently, Newport at 47, Sammamish at 47, Bellevue at 45, and add to that our middle schools, Odell and Highland at 45 and 39. So that particular combination of what are we looking at in terms of demographics, what are we looking at in terms of languages, what are we looking at in terms of countries of origin, I think you will continue to see us as, for example, Dr. Aramaki is looking at heritage languages and how we would deal with those in the Bellevue School District. So I simply wanted to call that to the attention both of the board and really a broader community of the Bellevue we now see in language, in income, in demographic makeup, and I think it's a fascinating little snapshot of Bellevue. So I will move on. Melissa DeVito would love to share with the board that we are about to sell $135 million worth of bonds, both in some were refinanced and some were initial sale in the last. So Melissa, would you give a quick clarification on the $135 million in today's climate?
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, board. So we have about 70 million would be new bonds, which we would use to continue the work that is happening at Newport High School. And it is from the bond election that was held in February of 2020. And so this is the second sale of bonds from that group of funding options. The other is we have about 65 million of bonds that just came up, and we're looking at refinancing them so that, and they just came available to refinance because there's rules around when they can. If the interest rates change and it is not financially beneficial for us to do that refinancing, then we would hold off on doing that. Our plan is to have a resolution for you to vote on at your next board meeting, November 3rd. So just wanted to give you a heads up that that will be coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I want to note, when I first came here, board members shared with me an issue that existed in Bellevue, and that was for our young people to try to get opportunities to complete SAT and PSAT tests. Last Wednesday came and went very quietly in some ways, but the Super Wednesday really was a day where our Bellevue students during the daytime in their home schools could meet the testing requirements. And I know I had a question earlier in the year from a parent that was down in a parking lot in Sumner, and it got canceled, and the last second, and the frustration of trying to get the young people with all the testing requirements. So I just wanted to note in terms of the board's encouragement to find a solution, that the district's response last year and again this year, and our intent to continue that as long as we're possibly allowed to. So I think you'd be proud, and I think the kids were very happy last on Super Wednesday. Two items that are not quite as happy. One is the smoke and where we are. Most of you have followed the news that today was probably the most unhealthy place on the planet in the Seattle and Puget Sound region. And at the same time, we have that kind of unique situation in which one of the more healthy places to be is with a very strong functioning modern heating and ventilating systems that exist in the schools. So in a way, we face that peculiarity that the safest place for them was in the buildings, and using that system, recognizing full well that we also have a conflict there between what's supposed to happen for COVID and what's supposed to happen for smoke. And one of them is supposed to be wide open, the other is supposed to be closed. With that exception, I would just commend really Jack McLeod, but the entire system on making sure that the buildings were as protected as they possibly could be, a safe place for kids. And I know I will have great company in the Puget Sound region welcoming rain back and washing out both the smoke and the fires. So on that note, I will just lament the air quality, but note that it's already in the process of changing. The last item I would mention is one of a third party, and we received notice last Friday that our Right at School daycare provider was going to be unable to continue to provide services in 8 or 9 of our schools. I won't try to speak for a third-party provider. They are a separate employer. They have their separate rules. But I would explain to both the public and to answer the board that that is a licensing requirement that they ran into, and they were unable to meet the conditions of their licensing, and they could not run safely and just ignore it. They did self-report. They had self-reported a number of times in the last couple of weeks. Melissa and Eva and really the entire crew executive team talked with the upper level management of Right at School. It's the first time in the entire nation that they have been unable to staff the program because they simply cannot hire enough people. They've added bonuses. They've created some actually unhappiness in their own ranks because they were paying people to sign on more than they were paying them to, and they've tried to deal with that. So I do want to give them credit for a very sincere effort, but the consequence to our district and to our families was that on very short notice, they were going to be left without childcare. Now I want to switch to just again a group that has stepped forward and they've done it in the past in Bellevue and they've done it elsewhere. Our Boys and Girls Club has stepped forth to replace childcare in each of the buildings that is unable to be served by Right at School. We have given them assurance that if they can do that for us, they can be the provider for the rest of the year. We're not going to try to wait till the third party can staff up and then replace the Boys and Girls Club. So I would encourage board, and certainly we have as staff and parents, to say a deep thank you for our Boys and Girls Club to step forth. There is a difference in the sense that they are chartered in a very different fashion than the third party childcare provider, and they don't have to meet the licensing requirements. So they have more flexibility in how they can staff their program and provide the childcare. So the good news is that we are in fact going to be able to provide. The bad news that in the one piece that they are not able to, they are not able to provide the before school care that Right at School was providing in several places. So that is a gap that we've been unable to fill as either by the third party provider or by Boys and Girls Club. So parents are rightfully suffering, having to make a fast coverage for themselves. And that's my explanation on the Right at School and where we are. And I finish on grateful note to a community that again stepped in to assist us. Right at School is the #1 provider, I think, in multiple states. It's got the best curriculum that you can look at but when you don't have staff, you don't have staff. So I understand the situation. And on that note, I would conclude my report to the board.
Thank you. Dr. Jarvis, there's, I know at least one comment, one question from Board Director online. So I'll ask Director Shuey. I do understand from what you've said before, you'll hear questions on things you've said verbally. You may not be able to or have the bandwidth to answer them right now, but you'll at least take them. So Director Shuey, we just need to be fast because we do have public commenters here. So I might ask Director Shuey quickly, Director Watson, and then take directors here as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, as President Serafan said, just the questions, but three questions are: one, what, when we talk about the increases and decreases in percentages or absolute numbers of students, and I believe that you're talking about percentages since that makes sense. If we could have the actual numbers, that would be excellent because it helps us contextualize. And actually, I only have two questions. And then my other question related to, sorry, would you mind taking another director's
No
question?
problem. Yeah, we'll come back to you. Vice President Watson, did you have a question or comment? If not, we'll move forward.
No.
Okay,
But
no
thank you
worries.
for the-
Please go ahead.
Me or Director Watson?
I think Vice President Watson was about to say thank you for, and then
report. I mean, I'm following along with what's going on with the smoke event and the childcare issue. So it was good and to hear more about it. And I'm always interested in bonds. So thank you.
excellent. Director
Okay.
Shuey, do you?
My second question is, and it's a question that I've posed through the Let's Talk app over the last year. It's hard to get an answer because I think there are so many different buildings, but I have a question of what the MERV levels are at the different schools and whether the community can see, because our schools do have, in terms of filtration, a range. I did get an answer from Let's Talk that there was a range of like MERV 8 through MERV 13 at the different schools. And when I said, well, can we get a better sense of which school has what? Because it does help the community members know and where we have to focus our energies and try to get everybody to the same level of protection against COVID and against the wildfires. That would be great to learn more about that. Thank you.
I second that question, but I had asked that before and was told I could not be given that information.
Okay, so I think the superintendent has both of your questions seconded on the second one on MERV. So we move on to Director Chu.
Thank you.
Great report. Thank you for noting the demographic shifts. We have become a lot more, we're already an exceptionally diverse community. We continue to become more diverse on many different fronts. And I think it's important to understand that. So if there's any way that data, as Director Shui requested, could be documented. And I am also interested in understanding if it's just a general shift or if there's like a trending shift grade level wise that indicates like, oh yes, this is these are expected to be pretty permanent or long term. That I don't want you to do lots more analysis, but I suspect you're already looking on that. So whatever information you have. Second question, I would just ask if I don't remember if we had to approve the contract for the childcare. I think that was an operational approval. So I don't know that there's anything you need from the board, but it actually makes me question, and I'll bring it up in the later section, whether or not there's some policy work we might do to help support that. And I also just like to say that in my experience over the last, I think 20 years, the Boys and Girls Club in our community has been an exceptional partner for our schools. They are imperfect, just like all of us and all of our organizations, but they're not only are they flexible, they are one of the most inclusive organizations and try so hard to respect every student that they serve, the families that they serve, and they're also one of the places and spaces where I see families of all income and language and other levels consistently brought together with opportunities to interact and to benefit from that cross. So I just want to say thank you to them for continuing to be such a great partner. I'm sure that everything they do is not perfect, but they have been exceptional and I'm very grateful. And then I think I will leave everything else to the policy discussion, but yeah, and I owe them the filters. I think we've had that question answered on multiple occasions in multiple ways. Sometimes the answers add layers or change things because, we're shifting what's in place at each school and so forth. But I think it's one that is of ongoing interest, and I think it's not going to stop because air quality continues to be an issue for various reasons, not just COVID. So I would say that, yes, that's an operational detail, and it's one that I think what you're hearing is there's a public interest in it. And so if we could increase the transparency to that information, I think that our community and our board would all benefit from that information. And I understand that it's an evolving thing, but if there's some way to keep that information present and updated, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Director Aris, if you have something, go ahead. If you don't, we'll move forward.
I just want to say thank you very much for making the testing or Super Wednesday nice and smooth so that all of our students have access to that, hearing all the traumas of stories of people traveling already and trying to take that test in from other school districts. I'm glad that we've made this a consistent thing for our students. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say the same. That was several years of a lot of pain points, and it was definitely a clear call and response. We called and you responded, so thank you. Okay, so we are now going to go to item 4, which is public comment. And Superintendent Jarvis, you have the questions from the board, and I understand you'll reply probably to board directors. But yeah, okay, so public comment. This is the time during our meetings where we receive public comment. Our board is grateful to receive public comment, and we appreciate the thoughtful input of our community. Because of the limitations of our calendar, we limit this to 20 minutes. So we ask you also to be mindful not to have your comments go beyond 2 minutes each, and there'll be a clock presented. We will listen to all your comments carefully, but we generally will not respond. Please remember that you can also communicate with us by email or voicemail. We expect our speakers to engage in a civil manner and not engage in any form of communication that's identified as unacceptable up there on the guidelines. And that includes slander, libel, invasion of privacy, obscenity, harassment, intimidation, bullying, or discrimination. We also want you to know that we can't accept public comment on pending investigations involving student discipline, as to allegations of employee misconduct, as to allegations of discrimination or harassment. And that's in order to preserve our ability to hear appeals. Again, we thank you, and we know, and we want you to know that while we'll be listening very intently to all your comments, we generally don't respond to comments in this setting. So with that, Ms. Worth, can you tell us who our first public commenter is? Okay,
Yes.
Jill Ingraham. Thank you.
I'm going to have our in-person commenters come up first. If you are online and would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand button at this time.
Thank you, Director. I'd like to first acknowledge and thank the district for acknowledging Dyslexia Awareness Month. And I have two additional asks for you tonight. First is to start thinking about the term dyslexic thinking. It is now actually a term you can add to your LinkedIn profile. 75% of dyslexics are above average in visualizing. 84% of dyslexics are above average in imagining. 71% of dyslexics are above average in communicating. 84% of dyslexics are above average in reasoning. 80% of dyslexics are above average on connecting. And 84% of dyslexics are above average on exploring. So as dyslexics really face, there are benefits and attributes to the way they think and the way their brain is wired. It's also a huge academic challenge. And as a academic institution, I would ask the board tonight if they would adopt the Washington State proclamation that Jay Inslee signed to make Dyslexia Awareness Month a specific recognized month officially in BSD. Approximately, if you take the 1 in 5 number, that's approximately 3,500 students within the district would be affected by dyslexia. And further, as the proclamation states, is that there are still challenges. I truly appreciate the progress the district is making, but there is more work to be done. And I think one of the ways we can do it is to start the conversation about how dyslexias or dyslexics will play into our future, into the future world. It's oftentimes the skill sets of dyslexic thinking that really are in need, and you have Microsoft and Meta and other companies are now specifically seeking out those workers. So as we are promoting students as their creators of their future world, what will the future of dyslexia and dyslexic students in the Bellevue School District be? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next is our next person Nathan Kim. Thank you.
I'll be taking off my mask when I speak. All right. Hi, members of the board. My name is Nathan Kim, and I'm a senior at Interlake High School. I'm the founder of the Interlake Bridge, a club with the goal of raising awareness about the Advanced Learning Program, also known as the Gifted Program, and the consequences that come with it, which impact both students in the Gifted Program and those not in it. I've been in the Gifted Program since I've been in 5th grade. And as I leave high school this year, I would like to inform parents, younger students, teachers, district board members, and the overall BSC community about the program that has played a large role in my life and the impact it has had on many students. Alongside 2 other students, today I'll be addressing some issues I see within Interlake High School, representing many Interlake students' voice when doing so. While the Gifted Program is an educational privilege for many students and is a core part of our district's curriculum, many gifted students have expressed experiencing a negative impact on mental health, social division, a lack of racial diversity, and many important issues. Those that are not in the Gifted Program have expressed their thoughts about issues, again, like social division and lack of resources and opportunities. I believe it is important that our community is aware of these issues to become more educated about the program and its impact on our schools. One of the most important issues in our community is the issue of mental health for these students, a concern for many parents and teachers. The insular nature of the Gifted Program creates a difficult and competitive environment, discouraging collaboration and promoting academic dishonesty. This also comes with the comparisons that gifted students make of themselves with others, which has created a toxic environment where many students' self-confidence and mental health are at risk. For myself and many of my peers, comparisons started in elementary school, where we would compare each other's test scores and grades in classes. In high school, this has expanded to include extracurriculars, leadership positions, internship, research opportunities, awards, and many more. The competitive culture has resulted in many students feeling overwhelmed and developing high levels of stress and anxiety, and many parents and teachers have expressed their concerns for these students. This, alongside the toxic interactions between gifted and general education students, has had a detrimental effect on our students' mental health, which is evident in the recent establishment of the Student Director of Life, who I am working with on this project. I believe that one day, the Gifted program can be improved to better students' mental health and to allow for an overall healthier community of Bellevue School District. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next student is Robin Anand.
Hey all, my name is Robin Anand. I'm a junior at Interlake and I've been in the gifted program for 9 years. I entered it in second grade well before I understood what the program even meant. And I want to make very clear, I do not hate the gifted program. It's given me some amazing opportunities for engagement, challenge, some really meaningful work, and some incredibly close friends. However, the isolated nature of the program creates an environment that is unhealthily homogenous in demographics, ideology, and experience. It creates a culture of misery, where chronic stress is normalized and leisure is shunned. The gifted program is a bubble, not a microcosm of real life and the experiences of most adolescents. Here are some notable demographics about Interlake. As far as race goes, the Asian population in gifted is 492 students, making up 78.3% of the population. The Hispanic population in the school is 276 students, making up 17.6% of the population. In gifted, that's 6 students, making up 1% of the population. The Black population in our school is 60 students, making up 3.8% of the population. In gifted, that's 1 student, making up 0.2% of the population. Unfortunately, that data does not account for mixed Black students or mixed students generally well because of the nature of the survey. As far as languages go, there are 51 unique languages spoken at Interlake, 45 unique languages spoken in general education, and only 28 spoken in gifted. There are 0 native Spanish speakers within gifted, despite there being over 200 in the school, and it's the second most spoken language at Interlake. The systemic mandated cohorting of programs in the classroom also has unintended de facto effects beyond it. Areas that do not mandate separation by programs, like lunch tables, clubs, or student leadership, are almost wholly split alongside program lines. By extension, those areas become segregated alongside racial and ethnic lines. That separation, intended or unintended, has limited diversity and connection across the school, and it has heightened prejudice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Next, we have, is it Ira Virani?
Hello, my name is Ira Virani, and I'm a junior at Interlake High School. I've been in the gifted program since 3rd grade. In elementary school, we were always told to sit with our class during lunch, gifted students. Over the past 8 years, these have been the same students that I've been exposed to in my classes, clubs, after-school activities, and all other extracurriculars. I'm a member of the Associated Student Body at Interlake, also known as ASB. The other 6 members of ASB at Interlake and also 14 of our 15 class officers who represent our school are in the gifted program. There are over 900 general education students who have almost no representation in our school. I'm often approached by students in general education who explain that they lack the resources to become involved in leadership, and that they're discouraged because gifted students have incumbency and a larger voter turnout. We have no opportunities to meet over half the students in our school, and as a result, we don't see them involved in ASB, class office, or other leadership roles in clubs and activities. This has taken a large toll on Interlake's school culture and mental health. For myself and many of my peers, the gifted experience is characterized by unhealthy competition within the program while having very limited interaction with over half the population of our school. So while I can say that I've built meaningful relationships over the last 8 years, I've also missed out on equally important opportunities to work with people outside the gifted program. We hope to improve the community of the Bellevue School District, not only at Interlake, but also in the elementary and middle schools and the other high schools in the Bellevue School District. We want to ensure that all students, whether in gifted or general education, have a more fulfilling and safe experience in our schools. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. So Ms. Worth, do we have people online?
I do not have anyone that has raised their hand online.
Okay, so with that, we are coming to the end of our public comment period. We just want to thank you again for taking the time to come and underscoring what we said at the outset, which is that we hear everything you say, we listen to it, it often sparks conversation, but we don't from here respond. So thank you. So with that, we move to item 5, which is, we have item 5.1, which will be a presentation from Executive Director Harrison on a schedule for policy review.
Thank you, President Serafan. You as a board have been really busy with policy work over the course of the summer months and the first couple of weeks of the school year. You adopted revisions and adopted a total of 10 policies. That's a monumental achievement. And as your policy liaison, really appreciate your support and work on these policies. So what I've done in the document, and Jess, if you could display the document, it might be helpful. What I've done is I've taken the policies, all of these policies were on this schedule initially, but initially there was a lot of TBD in terms of first and second readings, and then calendared out the first 10 policies over the summer and the first couple of weeks of the school year. And what I've done since then is taken the remainder of the policies on the schedule and I've proposed first and second readings. So phase 1, the summer work, the 10 policies that you've adopted and or reviewed were what I call high priority policies. They were policies that there was a sense of urgency to their adoption or revision and or there were legal requirements that needed to be in place where we, in a couple of cases where we were not compliant. So I called those high priority policies. The next batch of policies in what I'm calling phase 2 are what I've characterized as medium priority policies. And I've defined that by simply, these are just a handful of policies where there's been previous work done on these policies, typically by the former policy committees that you had in place at the beginning of last school year. So you see those policies in front of you. And like I said, I've proposed first and second reading dates, with the exception of the one policy, sustainability, and understand that there will be some conversation about that proposed policy a little bit later this evening. And then for phase 3, these are the additional policies that had been identified for review, either relatively minor revisions, and in some cases, in the case of 3 policies, a full review. And it's quite a docket, but over the course of the rest of the year, I think it's fairly reasonable schedule. There at no time, I think the most policies scheduled for a first or second reading is 3. So that's a big difference from the 6 and 5 that you dealt with in the first phase. So they're listed there for you. And I'll just say, I think I'll just call out the 3 that are scheduled for full review include policy 4130, which is parental involvement. The second one for full review is communications. Now that Chief Communications Officer Janine Thorne and her team have been intact for some time, they're in a place as they've been developing their strategic plan to be able to take a look at the policy and the procedure for that matter with respect to communications. And then finally, special education 2161 and 504 plans 2162. Those have been identified for full review actually for a number of years, and they're high priority, they're complex, and we've committed to a full review of those by the end of this school year. And they're listed, by the way, in order of first and second readings. In other words, chronologically throughout the school year. So that's what I have for you tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any comments or feedback that you may have.
I see. I think from what I could see, I think Directors Aris and Chu both have their hands up. I will start with Director Aris.
Thank you for creating this schedule. Looking at the special education full review, the special education policy, which is slated for May, June, or is it April, May?
April, May.
Can I ask why that late? Is it because of the amount of time it takes to do the full review, or?
Yeah, great question. In part, the complexity of it, and more importantly, I should have led with this, is that's a policy that has significant impact. It's a policy that codifies the rights for students and families, students with disabilities. It's a really important one that we get right. And a big component of that is consultation and community engagement with the families and students affected. So that will take some time. And I've been working with Director of Special Education Jeff Jorgensen on a process, and we're in progress in terms of developing what that community engagement process will look like, and obviously guided by our critical criteria.
Is there any way to speed that process up so that we are not pushing it to the end of the year? Because this is the one that I have been asking since last year to really look at it, and given the impact and looking through that policy and how behind we are in the language.
That's a great question and a fair request. We scheduled it later in the year to give us as much time as possible. As we've said on a number of occasions, this document is an evolving document. It's iterative in nature and it's subject to change. So we may be in a position to be able to bring it to you for first reading prior to that date, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't leave it, we wanted to provide us with enough time to do the work and do the work properly, but with enough time to make sure that we get this work done before the end of the school year, so it's in place for the beginning of next.
Okay,
Does that help?
Yeah, thank you
Can I
for
ask
clarifying that, because given that it is at the end of the school year, and it is in the way you place a priority phase 1, 2, and 3, and that being the least, it gives a different, I guess, perception to the public, as it is not as important as some of the other policies that we put in front of that.
And I'll just say, for the record, that there have been some pretty significant changes with respect to special education from OSPI and the state, number one. And number two, our current policy does not reflect our commitment to inclusion. And so those are the two kind of broad areas that we'll be addressing in the review.
Great, thank you very much.
Can I just build on, just to understand Director Aris's question? I think you're touching on this, but I just like to understand what makes it complex. And are we currently out of compliance? Like, do we have a policy that's not compliant? I think what I'm hearing from Dr. Aris is the language doesn't reflect how we should be speaking about and how we currently treat
I don't
special
believe that we're not.
education, but it would just help. I think as all of us sometimes get asked questions, it helps sometimes just to understand what makes that one more complex than something you might have prioritized
I
earlier.
think our attorney is trying to jump in and maybe
Oh,
scope your
okay, sorry.
question.
No, our policy is not out of compliance with law. There have been recommended, we have made changes consistent with when OSPI has changed the rules and regulations related to special education in the state of Washington. It has been several years since OSPI did that. What makes this complex is because special education is not just one set of laws. It's a set of federal laws, federal regulations, state regulations. And when, for example, IDEA got amended as a law in 2000, it took until 2011 for the state regulations to catch up with that. Plus, there are also issues that come up along the way through either case law OSPI guidance or United States Supreme Court decisions that cause those to be changed. And so typically we revise our policy and procedure whenever OSPI issues a new notice of procedural safeguards, which means that OSPI has determined that the information that parents need to know in order to have their rights under special education respected needs to be updated. And so that is typically when we update our policies and procedures. Our policy and procedure was last updated after the last OSPI update, so we are in compliance. That being said, the language choices around disability and individuals with disabilities change more frequently than the law and more frequently than policy. For example, whether you should refer to somebody who is on the autism spectrum as a person with an autism diagnosis or an autistic person is an area of significant debate. And I think our public speaker tonight pointed out a different use of the word dyslexia and dyslexic thinking. So there are certainly ways in which we can update our language to be more reflective of how people with disabilities refer to themselves. But as a general matter, our policy and procedure is compliant with current law.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McMenemy. And that answer was more thorough and more articulate than what I was going to answer you with. So thank you for that. Completely agree.
The reason I specifically push this one is because we've talked about inclusion. And I know that this policy lacks the verbiage around that. And yet we have, as a district, said that is a priority and importance to our community. And so I just want to make sure that we are listening and doing our best in that. But I understand that being a special ed teacher, I understand the complexity around all the laws and that it takes time. But I just want to make sure the optics on the schedule is clarified.
And primarily it's the making it later in the year was primarily to allow time for the public engagement we feel we need to engage in.
Okay,
And I also want to address that we do address inclusion in our policy and procedure. It's just identified in the language of least restrictive environment because inclusion has no legal meaning. And it's a phrase that can often be misunderstood or misused. Our policy uses the phrase least restrictive environment, which is aimed at ensuring that students with disabilities are spending as much time in the general education setting with their non-disabled peers as possible. And there is an intentional reason why inclusion is not used under the law because it has a very different meaning, though I think that this board's intent has always reflected the intent of the law to have students in their setting with their typically developing peers for as much of the day as it is appropriate for them, and to find ways like co-taught and push-in models that ensure that students are being served where they are rather than being removed from a setting in order to get services.
Thank you. I want to go to Director Chu.
Okay, thank you. I've got several comments. I want to say thank you to John for being on top of this. I really appreciate having a comprehensive plan for the policies. I think there's an opportunity to maybe shake up the plan a little bit and think a little bit more about it. I think we do an excellent job of aligning with compliance needs, and sometimes that has an impact on the degree to which we're able to get to all the policies that we'd really like to, in terms of aligning with not only our mission and our vision, which I think most of these do, but also like our annual plan and some of our values. So I'm going to talk about a few policies that I think are missing from the list and one or two that I think are on the list, but maybe could use some additional attention. And I would like to propose at some point that maybe we can have a board discussion about whether or not we want to talk to staff, but obviously we need staff input about capacity and what can be done. So John, thank you for giving us a platform to even have this conversation. It's really great. Okay, so stuff I want to bring up. Special education, big deal. Maybe consider doing an early pre-reading to let folks know where we're at, to give visibility to the community. I think sometimes we try to do we wait till it's in perfect shape to throw it over the fence. So maybe we can put it out there with a little vulnerability and get more input that way. And also have people follow the journey. because that's one of the things that we struggle with sometimes is we do such good work, we attend to things, but on people's behalf instead of with the people we want to do it with. So propose that a pre-reading might help, and I'd like to see some things included in that. I think Director Aris referred to way earlier, not tonight, about really appropriate training and time for staff to support that work, because that's how you change the system. You can't just throw more regulations at it. And I don't think that you're trying to, but like, so let's get explicit in our policy about our commitment to that. Next thing I want to bring up is we have a strategic plan that is focused so much on sense of belonging and student well-being and mental health. It has been one of our most successful and one of our most important initiatives, and we still have miles to go. And as I think was exemplified by the students speaking tonight, I think that we could use some policy statements that clearly articulate what it means to proactively support the student well-being piece. We are working really hard budget-wise for intervention services, but are we working as hard as we can on prevention services? Is our culture adding to the stress and issues that these kids are experiencing? And if it is, shouldn't we be changing our policies and our approaches so that we are actively, proactively in our classrooms with our instruction, actually enhancing their well-being instead of taking away from it? So for me, that's a huge one, and I think that we might want to pump up the importance of it. I'm going to go through a few more, and again, I think it's going to need a follow-up discussion. I think we need an approval we need a policy that we've talked about multiple times and we keep putting off for approving contracts and expenditures of the district that I think our community, our citizens expect us to have the responsibility to oversee and approve. And we keep putting it off. And frankly, I think we're in a really good place to do it right now. It doesn't need to be put in place so that we can circumvent anything. It really just needs to be put in place because it's the right thing to do. And so I think now's a good time. The 3122 policy, when we passed that as requested because there was an urgency to updating it, I maintain that there is an issue with attendance and online learning opportunities that are given to our students, particularly in secondary. And I think that needs explicit consideration because it is an equity issue and it is something that helps bring kids back to the classroom. There are complications. I don't mean to imply that it's simple, but we need to put that back on the list. We were asked to pass it with the understanding, in my view, that we would follow up. So I want to see that back on the list if possible. Online learning opportunities. Our district sees that as a way to meet unmet needs in students that aren't met the way that things are, not just as 100% online learning, but as partial online learning and lots of other creative ways. We're investing in the program. We continue to support it, yet we don't necessarily have a policy that's up to date with the work that we're doing. So I think if we want to make sure that we develop that program with the same priorities and on the same page, we as a board are responsible to make sure that there is a policy in place to guide that work. Number 4, we are so committed to equity, and I think that of all the work that's been done in many of the past years, our grading is one of the biggest opportunities for us to become more equitable. We don't have that policy on this list. It was on this list 2 years ago. It just seems to have dropped slowly from existence. I know there are people still working on it. I want to see its priority come back up. Before and after school care. You know, one of the fundamental things that came up in today's conversation was our different programs that enable those things to happen. They have different approaches. And because they have different approaches, that might be good to have a diversity for our community. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but you know, we're funding and we're coordinating with some providers and partners in different ways. Should we have a coordinated policy to guide those decisions so that we are aligned in what we prioritize and how we do that? And then finally, I think our SRO policy may need some updates to clarify and make sure that we're all on the same page, because having a positive relationship with our police departments so that they are informed and understand how to get into our schools, how to work with our school officials, and are able to respond to issues there. And then also upon occasion, have collaborations that are appropriate, but also respecting the needs of our students who are often traumatized by that presence or impacted by it in ways that we certainly never intended. And I think, I'm not sure that our policy, the way that it's written, reflects our values and the guidelines that we want in place for that to be the case. So for me, those are, I guess, 8 policies that I'd like to see some attention to. One of them's on the list already, so it's 7 additional policies. Thank you.
So I'd like to go to Vice President Watson and just see if you have if you had anything additional. I just want to note, we also have director discussion, and I want to ensure that we don't run out our time. I do have a suggestion maybe of bringing this back, Executive Director Harrison, with the benefit of our board planning meeting. We have one coming up. We could use that time to maybe talk through this a bit more if that allows. But let me ask first Vice President Watson if she has anything, and then Director Shuey.
Just 2 things. I want to thank Director Chu. It seems like you went through very thoroughly to a whole bunch of policies, and I feel like, wow, I should have done that too, but I didn't. So hopefully there'll be time to catch up later. But I think the main problem is going to be, just prioritizing them, because he's got a pretty dense schedule there. But obviously it's something that we could discuss and weigh our options. But I also wanted to say, I really appreciate this surge in people trying to make data comprehensible. The way he's got this on one page. We used to have policy schedules and things like that, but this is the clearest one I've seen yet. And I also wanted to just insert, also I appreciate what the teaching and learning department did. So I'm just all for trying to make data succinct and manageable in the world that we live in.
Director Shuey, do you have anything additional?
No, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to, Executive Director Harrison, if you're okay with it, I would propose, and I'd like to know what other board directors think, that if we have a little more time, since this policy schedule is something that I think it's worth talking through with less sort of pressure on our time, and we have the board planning meetings, we could carry this over to, I think, the one that's on the 31st, and then we'll have a meeting, I think, on the 3rd of November, and perhaps we could come back at that time. Would that work on your side?
The only challenge is I'm not here on the 31st.
That does create a problem.
Yeah, and that's of course, one of the
Okay.
challenges with a single board liaison.
Sure. So I don't know if your mic is on, but okay, well, we could figure out what to do. I think the main question is there an imperative to get this passed tonight on your
And
side?
there's nothing here to pass. This was for your information.
Oh, I thought it was for action. Maybe I misunderstood that. I thought it was listed as action. It said consent. So, oh, you know what? I'm looking at the wrong item. So that's good.
And perhaps in agenda planning.
Discussion,
tomorrow,
yeah.
we can talk about it more, but
Okay.
appreciate this.
Then I think we have the opportunity to talk through
Correct.
in a board planning meeting
Yes.
when you're present.
Yeah.
To get a prioritization that I think is both more reflective of, some of the comments you've heard tonight, but also doable from your side. So I'd just like to know, what do others think about that?
I would deeply appreciate that. I also do think that at some point there should be board action that approves the policy plan. We worked very hard a number of years ago to take responsibility as a board for our policies and to make sure that the right priorities were being tended to, and that the board was not just, and I don't accuse this board of doing such, but not rubber stamping just things that come from the state or things that come from staff or what have you, that we'd be a proactive part of prioritizing and setting the direction for our policies. So I'd like to see what you said, and I'd also like to see some level of board agreement.
No,
May I-
agreed. I do
may-
think the
may I-
one thing I would say is in our board development plan for the year, a few of the policies that you talked about are very much governance oriented, that we had talked about developing a kind of a point of view, and then with the new superintendent, kind of developing how we want to have those policies, because we will be partnering with that person going forward on those governance ones. So the very ones you're talking about with contracts, and as well as relationship with with the police, and some of those there's 4 policies in particular. We can discuss more, but I think that was at least proposed to be discussed, envisioned, but maybe not actually passed until we had that partnership with that new superintendent. And that was the advice of our current superintendent, as well as Mr. Harris. So not Harrison, but Harris. So I just put that out as something to think about.
And may I just on the approval point, and I appreciate that, Director True, the process, and it's a relatively new process. The policies that you dealt with in the summer was the first set under this new process. You did approve this policy. You approved the policy schedule in May and listed all of these policies. That's not changed, other than when it was approved, it was with the understanding and the caveat that this was an iterative document, that things, may change. So this now what's changed is assigning dates, for first and second readings. So this list has been approved, but I understand and appreciate the comment. But I just want to make the point that this list of policies was approved for work this school year by you in May last school year.
Okay,
Thank you for that point. That's helpful. And I think, as you said, set to evolve. And I think that as I've watched the year start to unfold, there are a few things that have just risen in importance. So I would ask that those be revisited. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
That seems like a reasonable set of requests all around. So why don't we go to director discussion? We have, let's see, I can do this. We have like 18 minutes. I do want to adhere to time so that a very important visioning discussion that we have coming up, we're able to do. I'm going to just note that tonight I'm going to somewhat reflect the fact that last time I did go back last night and just confirm, but our director discussion last time, we went in alpha order, and we spent most of the time with directors Aris and Chu, which was great time spent. I do want to kind of tonight probably pick up, and I might start it and then go to directors Shuey and Watson. Director Watson, did you have your hand up or did you just take it down?
I just took it down. I'll when it comes around my turn, I'll.
All right, well, I will try. Yeah, we have basically 18 minutes, so I have 2 items. My first item is, I would say, a circle back from what I brought up in director discussion in April. And the topic of policy is relevant because this is the sustainability policy that I said I would try to draft something for consideration by the district. Can I ask Jesse, I pulled this together too late to be able to add it as a board agenda item, but moreover, there wouldn't have been any action. I was going to be sending it to Executive Director Harrison to review, and rather than just email it to him and copy you guys, I thought I should use a demonstrative during our discussion. So this is a sustainability policy, and I have a deck that that's the actual policy I tried to draft. So could I just have Jess, could you project the PowerPoint? There we go. So we'll start with just slide 1. This is going to look a lot like what I showed you in April, but the content is different. The biggest challenge I had was, what was great was I talked about this in April and I got really great feedback and ideas from people who contacted me. And one of them was Deputy Superintendent Collins sent me a lot of materials from Western Washington University and some other places. But I frankly found the hardest thing getting this down to a page and a half policy. So I'm just using a PowerPoint that I put together just to try to talk through what is in the policy. So I basically tried to break it down to 4 pillars. And the policy is intended to say to the superintendent that it's the superintendent who needs to come up every 2 years with a plan that outlines 4 pillars: how we spend our resources, how we essentially keep our students and educators and staff safe, how we increase our collective understanding through our education, and how we engage with the world. So that's essentially what the policy outlines. And I attached the attempt of proposed policy, which if you want to project it, you can, if you've got it available, but it's online so that you guys can see what John Harrison will have. So if you expand it, what you can see is what can also look at, but essentially is asking the superintendent to implement a vision. And this is basically a preview of what I'm asking the district through the superintendent to consider. And it's a preview before even a first reading. So that is that. So that is my proposal. And I know that in April when I raised it, the comments I got from Director Shuey and Watson were both, I think, positive and supportive. Director Aris asked to make sure there was student voice, and I did try to make sure that that was very clear. It's called out as community engagement. And I know Director Chu questioned whether, like, do we need this, knowing that we have been really successful with great buildings that we've done? And I think this is the proposal I suggest is that we consider something just broader than only talking about buildings. But I agree that our district has been super successful with the quality of our buildings. Director Aris?
Quick question. Have you used the critical criteria as you went through this process?
It hasn't even gone for a first reading. So it goes first to the district. So I wouldn't have a way to really be able to do that quite yet. So this is just my attempt to even pull together what would I propose. But you're absolutely right. The reason I think a sustainability policy is needed, and the reason I call out, like, we should be thinking about how we hire people. So you'll see under here that I think how we, like in the PowerPoint, I make it clear, like, how we educate our students should impact who we hire and how we hire. Because if we hire from people who understand how sustainability will impact the most marginalized communities, we will have people who can actually teach the impact of sustainability based on firsthand knowledge. So I do think the critical criteria will be very important. It's also reflective of the very purpose behind the critical criteria, which is that we ensure that the impacts of what the actions we're taking, as well as how we're teaching, reflect all aspects of our society. So
No, I appreciate that. No, the reason I asked that question is not I understand that it hasn't landed on the district space yet, but as you're developing this, if you were utilizing that tool to kind of guide you to make sure that you're trying to cover all of the, prevent all of the possibilities of harm, I guess is what I'm.
yeah, what I would invite all of you to do is participate. It's an attempt. So I had in our meeting in April, I had some feedback right away from folks here and then verbally later. But this is a way that we can talk about this and hopefully get to an outcome that's reflective of what we all would like. Director Chu?
Thank you, Seema. This is, it's great to see the passion in this. And I think it's unfortunate that you mischaracterized my input from before. What I said was that I do think that we have in numerous places, not only our buildings, but also if you look at our nutrition services approach, if you look at our student organizations, and if you look at many of our cultural initiatives across our schools and our district, we are doing innumerable things to actively be environmentally conscious. Many of those have been instigated by not just our district, but also by our staff and our students. And the comments that I made were twofold. One, it was to recognize that those were there, but at the end of the conversation, you may recall or not, that I agree that a comprehensive policy to set some direction on this would be a good idea. The caveat that I put on that in some of our conversations, I don't know if it's the conversation you reference, is that I think a policy like this gives our community an enormous opportunity to participate because we already have evidence of their participation. And so I think giving them a framework is great. But then the other thing that I would ask you is, this is a great policy. There are a lot of great policies and a lot of great needs that we have. What elevates this one in terms of, like, you authored it. So if I go off and I author one on some other area and bring that, does that trump the things in the other list? How does that, in order to get the critical criteria review that we're talking about, which I think this needs more than a review. I think it needs or part of that review is stakeholder engagement and ideas and creativity so that our community will own it. How do we make the decisions about what we will put the time into and how does it compare to the rest of the prioritization? Because I actually agree that this is a good policy to have. I just also agree that the critical criteria are critical in terms of its planning, not just its post authoring review, and that we've got so much in our community to offer for this. And I also want to make sure that it, like all the other things that we are worried about, when we decide what to spend the time on, that we prioritize it together and decide what's going to take the time. So great thinking, great stuff to move forward. I'd happily add it to our list of policies, and then just have that comparison, that prioritization discussion.
Yeah, I think the question of prioritization is the one that comes to the board. But I'd say on this, that was why I raised it in April, that I would come back in 6 months and anybody who wanted to join could. The two people who expressed an interest were Directors Shuey and Watson. There really wasn't a way to do a trio. So I thought, if I hear things from people, I'll try to put it in, but ultimately it's going to have to come through the same process as any other policy. So
and just
that's why
to be
it's here
clear, like,
tonight.
I have an interest as well. So I don't know. I
That's
just want to
absolutely
clarify.
fantastic, which is why this is not even a first reading. It's just in director discussion, not even as a board agenda item. The reason I think it's the whole board has to decide, I can't think of a more existential or urgent issue than sustainability. Where we decide to prioritize this is going to be a board decision. So is there anybody online, Directors Shuey or Watson, who want to speak?
Well, okay, I'll let Joyce go first.
Sure. It actually was one of the topics that I wanted to talk about in board discussion too. So if I have it in both places, that would be great. Although maybe we'll cover it here, which is just, I agree with the way that President Serafin just described it. Is I can't think of a more pressing existential kind of just issue either. And one thing that I had prepared for the board discussion was just to say that our children, the K through 12 and the ones who are in preschool and the ones who are about to be born, they're the most impacted by our decisions now. And it's, the entire nation, the entire world of children, and they're going to inherit what we leave them. And so we need to act quickly. We see what's going on. It's actually, today is a great time to be talking about it because we are, as Dr. Jarvis said earlier, we are right now sitting in the middle of the worst air quality in the whole world and the whole planet. So that means that people may very visually, and maybe in many of us, you can hear it in our voices, we're impacted. And just remember that it is very likely going to get worse before it gets better. And so we need to urgently work on this. And I appreciate that we need to prioritize with all of our other policies, which I think everybody, all the board directors agree and are saying the same thing. I just wanted to lend my voice, which may be the same as everybody's, is that this is a really important issue that we need to come at all different angles from all parts of the community. And I appreciate this. I know it's a lot of work to put together, the first draft of something. And so thank you.
I guess it's my turn. I was just saying, I really appreciate this as something that can start the discussion and get us going. And we're talking about all the other people in the district that are interested in it. Over the years, there have been so many green clubs and things from the different student groups, and staff have been working on different things. But, you can just see from the way we're choking today that this is number one. It's number one on my list for the future world for the kids. And then the second one is the state of democracy, but we can't address that with this policy. But yeah, so I think just having a
I'm
board
sorry,
member,
Director Watson, I didn't make that out. What was the last part of what you said?
the democracy, but I think that, we can't do that with the sustainability policy, but hopefully we do that with our some of our social studies lessons. But no, I personally, I think it's really high priority, and I think that it's great that someone brought it forward. But yeah, I think there's plenty of opportunity to get the input from a whole bunch of people, do the critical criteria, see what the students think, but we have something to at least start with.
Okay, why don't I had one more item which I can say in 15 seconds, and then I think we should move on to other directors. But the short thing I wanted to say is our Chief Communications Officer, Janine Thorne, has responded to an ask I had about whether a year or so ago, we had kind of a moment where we as a board realized our community doesn't know a whole lot about us, even though we try to get out and go to visit schools and we have like a short bio online. And I noticed there are the videos that are being done from around the district. And so she had a proposal, which was we could do a 90-second video each if we'd like. And she has a great outline for it. And she'll probably be sending that to each of us through Hannah Worth. And I just wanted to call that out and sort of say it's completely optional, but I wanted to just thank her for putting that idea together and let you know it might be coming through our board coordinator. Director Aris?
Before we move on, I just want to make one last comment regarding this policy, sustainability policy. And I'm hearing everyone saying that, I shouldn't say many of the board members saying this is a high priority, but I'm going to say it is not mine. If I were to look at the list of the policies that we need to look at, whether to review or address or create, sustainability is definitely in a space that we need to address. But given that we are in academic space, to me, addressing special education policy supersedes this because that hits home faster.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I just want to get it out there in the context of this conversation. Environmental sustainability is exceptionally, it is urgent in terms of being able to look to the future because you can't solve it in the future. You can't put it off. And if our district were going down a different path with the way that we approach sustainability and ecological responsibility, then for me, this would raise its priority. But because Melissa DeVita and her team have been, frankly, almost exceptional about this on like so many different fronts, and our community itself is already driving stuff, I would like to codify it in policy and get it straight. And I would love to have it as part of the policy discussion. But the urgency for me is in terms of Are we doing things in our instructional process that actually do damage to kids? Are we doing things in our, educational process that disincludes students or doesn't give them the full opportunity that we intend to give them? And if we need policy to help prioritize those things, for me, that is way higher. Student well-being, student learning is of the greatest urgency because losing children from our system is not okay. Kids who are checking out because they are depressed or suicidal, kids who are checking out because they don't feel like the learning opportunities include them or touch them in relevant ways. That is as deep a crisis to me as an ecological one, and it has so much greater urgency for me because of our excellent staff who have made the ecological decision making. They've used the right yardsticks. They've put us in the right places. So yes, let's codify it. But if I were to prioritize and put some urgency, I'd be careful about that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a zero-sum equation. I think some of these can be done in tandem, but I go back to the first point. It's a board decision that we should make together. Vice President Watson?
Just to chime in on that point, I do feel that sometimes, like when we recycle and we worry about things like that, it's a very small contribution to what's actually needed. But the thing on here that moves me and makes me feel like this is high priority is the part about the collective understanding, the creators of the future world, their collective choices, the students getting the information about their choices and actions for the physical world and their math and science programs. And then where we talk about integrating sustainability into learning. I know the kids have already started on this path, some of them with the clubs and stuff, but right now I am sitting here in a town where adults do not understand this at all. And I could cite instances, but I just think that it's urgent that no kid graduates from the Bellevue School District without understanding the science behind this and what they can do to contribute to a better world. And so that's why I think it's urgent.
Okay, I want to just make sure for board director discussion, Director Shuey and Watson have just spoken. Director Chu has spoken, so has Director Aris. But if there's anything else as we recess before our basically our study session that's coming up, is there anything anybody wants to say in the last few minutes? I see
I have a
Director
request.
Shuey's hand up, Director Chu's hand up. Would you like to go first and then, but just be mindful, there's several people who want to talk.
Right, and I suppose I thought that we were still going to have other discussion, but if that was it, then
No, we just have kind of like last time, we've run out of time a bit. We also went over on policy, but I would go ahead and take a minute or two because if there's something you want to say, I don't want to truncate anything. So go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for that, because we've had, as you know, a few board meetings where we weren't able to get to director discussion. And then last time I spent my entire 6 minutes on one item. And so I guess that if I can have a couple minutes, I would appreciate that. One, I wanted to just update the community, which they've probably seen some updates that the superintendent search, the application is open. And I wanted to also shout out to Janine Thorne and the communications department for the all over our website now is splashed the application, and I encourage folks to let folks know about our application process being open, and it all directs back to the Human Capital Enterprises website. And so I'm really excited that that is underway. Or it's been underway for a long time, but this part of it now being the active recruitment phase is exciting to see underway. A second thing that I wanted to just sort of stage for discussion later on in the next few months is that as we do, and I may have mentioned this before, but didn't have as much time to talk about it, is that as we do our critical criteria review, which I think is really, such a great aspect of how we approach our decisions in Bellevue. So thank you to all the board directors who were involved in that long before I was. I would like to consider having an item on the critical criteria review that describes who had input into that policy or who is the author of that policy. not necessarily an individual's name, but just departments so that we get a sense, just like we do on research papers and then the kind of research of knowing where biases, whether unconscious or intentional, might exist. And I think I mentioned it before, but I wanted to say it again just because I will be, as we talk about policies and what to prioritize, this would be a very tiny kind of recommended or proposed change, but wanted to let folks know that that's something that's on my mind, and I would love to see it integrated into our critical criteria review
Joyce,
template.
could you clarify, are you talking about the policy itself? Or were you talking about like when the critical criteria review report is done for each time?
Yeah, each time the report is done so that we get a sense of who actually had input and wrote the review. Because when you look at it now, it's really helpful in the sense that it provides, you know, a bit of an analysis, but without really knowing who the author is, meaning potential, you know, perspectives of biases, just like you do with, you know, medical literature or whatever. It would be helpful to have. Does that answer that question? And so the policy, or maybe it's the procedure, would allow for us to ask for that to be part of it, just like the other components that are there. Not dictating, of course, what it says, but what fields it should include. Does that answer the question? Director Chu, I can't see you. But...
Yes.
Okay, and then I wanted to also finally close on the topic of language, which we've heard discussed a few times tonight, and say that I love our district in the sense of it so many different ways, but also in particular the sense of language matters to us, because the more precise and accurate you are, the more evolved and the more improved of a society you can have. And so last time I spoke about the police officers with weapons in our buildings and being attentive to the fact that for a while we called them SROs, and now there is this proposal to call them CEOs, which I think is a dangerous and inaccurate abbreviation for it. And I wanted to repeat that and also say that it's similar to tonight. I liked what Director Aras had to say about when we say things, whether it's unintentionally or what the impact is of highest priority. And this is not to criticize how you know, the list was put together, but thank you, Director Aras, for saying that, because it makes all of us pause and realize, yes, this could have an intended impact that makes sense, because the language does say, you know, highest priority. So we think about that. So I want to just encourage us to continue to think about language, and it makes us all better because we think about it and we get better at it. We talked about earlier, General Counsel McMinamy also talked about things like talking about whether it is somebody with autism versus an autistic person, and there's you know, a good healthy debate about those kinds of things, and that's how we learn. So thank you for bringing those issues up, and I will continue to do so as well. Thanks.
Is there anybody else? All right.
I have a request, and that is simply that when there are things that are part of our official role, that are part of the board stuff, like giving an update on the legislative assembly and positions and advocacy, that not be relegated to board comments, but it be given its own agenda item in board business, so that board comment time is actually like equally distributed in terms of what, you know, new initiatives and thoughts and other things that people are able to propose because of what they have to spend their time on.
Yeah, the thing is, on that, just so when you had asked to have it on the board agenda, I did. This last time, when the last meeting, it was, I think I had not had that request, so I didn't have it in the board agenda. And then when we started director discussion, you guys had a lot, and I thought, that's why it went for 33 minutes, because I thought it was a good use of time for us to all hear it. So, but I didn't receive a request. I did before, and I made sure I had added it to the board business, and it had its own agenda item, as you remember. So if you'd asked me to do that, I absolutely would have, and happy to do it again. I mean, let's be clear, I'd not received a request. If I had, I absolutely
Okay.
would have added it.
I don't want to have arguments in the middle of the board meeting about, was the proper thing put in place? I simply made a request. I didn't
Yeah,
need you to
absolutely.
take it as an opportunity to explain why it was like my fault that it was done the way it was. And I don't know why that seems to be a pattern, but I thank you for the information.
Okay, we're going to recess to our board study session now.
Do we hang out on this same bridge?
I think we're going to get direction from Jess and Hannah. The time is now 8:24 p.m. We have finished our study session and the meeting is now adjourned.